Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. I am Heena Gambhir. To begin with, can you recall the oldest debate in independent India? Well, let me help you here. Let me give you some hints. The oldest debate, as old as our grandma tales have been. India is poor because we have a huge population. Remember? Naturally, to tackle the core problem that impacts economy, welfare schemes, environment, jobs, and almost everything under the sun and the moon. There have been population control schemes as well as slogans. But has that stopped India's march to edge past China to be the most populous nation in a few years? The answer is no. As per a report by United Nations, by 2027, India is projected to overtake China as the world's most populous country. Another report, as per World Population Review, by 2030, India is expected to become the most populous country in the entire world. Let's return to India of today. The question is, does India need a population control law? Well, more than 35 times since independence, laws on a two-child policy have been proposed in Parliament, but have never been passed. In 2016, Population Control Private Member Bill was introduced by Mr. Prahlad Singh Patel as an MP. His bill proposed a cap of 2 living children per person or family. It added that for any medical reason, if one requires a third child, that person will have to apply to a board at the district level headed by the collector. And only if the collector gives the permission, this board gives the permission, the family will be allowed to have the third child. Otherwise, this proposal, this request will be rejected. And tonight, I'm talking about this issue on Urban Debate because Prahlad Patel, now as a union minister, has said that India will soon have a law for population control. He went on to say that the government has in the past taken strong and big decisions and indicated that there would be no hesitation on a population bill. The question is, does India need a two-child norm as a government-dictated policy, or it needs a population that endorses and follows a two-child norm? Technically, yes. It is important to control population explosion. Then there is another angle to the bill to tame population. Now, we all know public health is a state subject. Many state governments already have measures for population control. A dozen states already have a two-child policy, a two-child norm. UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath last July unveiled a policy aimed at stabilizing the population in UP and reducing maternal and infant deaths. He plans to bring a bill soon. Assam government plans a similar law. So isn't it another attempt by centre to step into the territory earmarked for states by the Constitution? Especially when the health minister himself, Mr. Mansukh Mandavia, recently, while opposing the two-child rule in Rajya Sabha, said the government had successfully used awareness and health campaigns to reduce population growth rather than using force. He also said that the country has witnessed a reduction in total fertility rate, the average number of children per woman, to 2.0 nationally. We know coercive methods and legal deterrence historically have been found to create negative or zero impact in controlling the population growth. The draconian sterilization drive during emergency period had a very strong social reaction, and there were large instances of oppressive methods being deployed. Over the decades, India has chosen the path of awareness than coercion or legislation. Slogans urging people to adopt lesser number of children norms have been a tradition in India. So what can be the objective of a proposed central legislation? Does it address the key question, or is it yet another disruptive political tool? That's our big debate on urban debate on Mirror Now this evening. Joining us on the broadcast tonight is Desh Ratan Nigam, who's a lawyer. We have with us Professor Geeta Bhatt, academician, Professor Tanveer Ejaz, who's a columnist and academician, also joining us on the broadcast. We also have with us Touseef Ahmed, lawyer and political analyst. Good evening to all of you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. Let me begin the discussion with you, Professor Geeta Bhatt. How should we read what the Union Minister has said when the Health Minister of the country has already made it clear that, awareness campaigns have really helped India in controlling population? He was opposing the two-child rule in Rajya Sabha. He said the government had successfully used awareness and health campaigns to reduce population. So then what should we make of what the minister today is talking about?
Well, Heena, first of all, thanks for inviting me on your show. And you see, as you were mentioning, that procreation is a human right, I must say, and no one no law should be there which takes away this fundamental right from any individual. But when we are talking in terms of the resources that our country has, vis-a-vis the percentage of population of the world that we have, which you yourself have mentioned that we are going to be the most populous country by 2030, which is not very far away. It is important that at a time when we have a very young population and we need to harness our demographic potential, but at the same time in a very sustainable manner, so that the various kind of resources of the country, whether it is in terms of natural resources, whether it is in terms of environmental resources, whether it is health, whether it is malnutrition, and many other developmental indicators. It is important that while there have been various awareness campaigns, and there is a section of the country where the fertility rate has been controlled, or the replacement fertility rate has been achieved. But at the same time, we also have to see that there are certain pockets within the country, largely in the northern part and the central part of the country, where the fertility rates are still much more higher. And therefore, it is important that we need to look at this concern of population control at this time with a lot of sensitivity, but also with a lot of pragmatism. And at times, this debate somehow, for some reason or the other, whether discussion related to population, somehow, it goes into a direction where it is not meant to be good. It needs to be, taken out of any kind of a religious perspective and has to be seen in totality, because the resources of the country are for all the citizens of this country.
Right. But the question then, Professor Tanveer Ejaz, is who really injects the religious angle in a debate like this?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what Professor Geeta Bhatt has said, she has hinted that there is certain pockets where there is still very high, the fertility rate is very high. So I would rather ask her that what pockets that she's talking about is there in her mind. But keeping that aside, let's not get into the whole controversy of religious angle out here. I mean, one will have to look into the kind of governmentality with which this whole issue of population has been raked time and again, particularly by this government, as some sort of a whip to always create some sort of a scare and a fear among certain pockets, that what Geeta Bhatt was talking about. Look, fertility choices depends not on what Geeta Bhatt has in his mind. I think she's having a neo-Malthusian panic in her mind. That more population, of course, will have a very bad effect on the resources, and of course there are certain sections, which are sort of a termite eating away certain resources, and they should be therefore barred. If this is what they meant, and mind you, this whole thing is coming from a minister. In a parliamentary democracy, a statement by a minister holds a collective responsibility. So I would rather say that it's the government which has this in its mind, that somehow bring out certain kind of punitive measures to control the population. Nowhere, why China has abandoned its one-child policy norm? This is a very simple question that one needs to ask. The kind of demographic distortions which come when you bring in certain punitive disincentives and a lot of coercive measures to control population has not worked. You yourself have said that it doesn't work anywhere. There are lots of other areas that needs to be looked into about fertility choices. If one is really very serious about fertility choices of a couple, you need to make robust, comprehensive population policy, focusing more on the economic, socio-economic, cultural aspect, cultural structure, particularly about, how the autonomy of a woman's agency can be increased. I see complete absence of women's autonomy in terms of deciding about the fertility choices. Fertility choices is a matter of a family, of a couple, and a state should not get into this way in order to create a very carrot and stick kind of a policy. So one has to be aware of the fact that, either you are hinting at some sort of a polygamy or polyandry. UPA state bill, which came up, had 4 or 5 pages of issues, definitions on polygamy, which was not required. If you're very serious about population control, you have to have certain other measures that need to be injected in the society rather than what Sanjay Gandhi did or what, in China did since 1975 onwards.
I think, Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam, those are some very interesting points that have been made in the debate so far. What is the objective here? Is it about reducing poverty? Because we all have seen the kind of relation that, rise in population has with the GDP of any particular country. But unfortunately, this entire debate, every time this happens, takes a different turn altogether. Why is it that, certain communities feel threatened? Or do you think it is used by, political parties probably as some sort of a political gimmick? Because see, I was looking at some data. Since independence, at least 35 times attempts have been made to come out with a law to control population. Proposals have, come to the parliament, but they have never been passed. And if states already have their policies, a lot of states have their own policies to control population, why then talk about a population control law from parliament?
In fact, population control and family planning falls under the concurrent list. Let's make it very clear. Both the state and the center have the power to make the policy. And let me give you a few data. India's, share in the world surface area is 2.4%. And the population is 18%. And we have 4% of the potable water of the world and 18% of the population of the world. It itself shows that our resources are scarce. And the per capita statistic, despite so much of progress in this country over many decades, the per capita statistics is very slowly improving, or it is almost static. So despite so many progresses, the resources are not being distributed in a manner and in a proportion that should go on a per head basis. So this would be the basis of my argument. Now, secondly, statistics also show the region-wise divide. UP, Bihar, and certain other parts are above 2%. In fact, 2.1% is the replaceable level of the population. But Bihar is somewhere about 3%. UP is, I think, about 2.4, 2.5% as per the latest statistics. So there is a disparity region-wise. Southern states are in the negative. And you have to, if you have to have a policy, it has to be, these disparities in regions and in communities. Muslims, yes, the religious angle does come into the picture because Hindus has come down somewhere about, below 2%, and Muslims is somewhere about 2.6, 2.7%, the fertility rate. So forget about religion. The fact is, it is about equitable distribution of resources and improving the life of the people. And we have to see as a nation as a whole, not about from the community's perspective. Some political parties get into fear mongering that the Muslims populations or some communities population will go down if this comes. And therefore, we do require an awareness program, no doubt about it. And awareness is the best thing. And if it is self-volition and self-regulatory, it is a wonderful thing. But the fact remains that we do require a certain set of incentives and disincentives to control population in certain areas which are still,
But
far ahead of.
Touseef Ahmed, those kind of incentives and disincentives already exist in certain states. Those kind of policies are already there. How will you like to respond to what has been said so far by Professor Geeta Bhatt, by Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam? Isn't population control the easy way out? Because poverty, we all know, is a tougher nut to crack.
Well, yes, I agree that the population bill may not be the easiest way out, because you see, if you're talking, you look at the object that is written in the draft bill. It says because there is scarcity of resources, and in order to improve in order to have an equitable distribution of resources, this law is being passed. On one hand, government says this is the object of the bill, and on the other hand, the same ruling party, MPs and MLAs, they are saying that Hindus must produce more babies. And I can give you the names like BJP MLA Vikram Saini, BJP MP Sakshi Maharaj, BJP MLA Bairia Surinder Singh, and you have elements, Hindu fanatic elements like Yati Satyadev Nanda Saraswati, then Sadhvi Ritambra, and on top of it, even in 2016, Agra Convention of RSS, it was said that Hindus must produce more children. So government sounds, very confused. On one hand, they say that we'll bring the law to control the population, and on the other hand, government takes no action against these elements who say that on the basis of religion, you must produce babies. So, they don't know what they want to do. And I fear that the law will become one more tool of oppression for use against non-Hindus, because we cannot close our eyes to the realities that we see in some places of our country, to the treatment that is meted to the minority communities, whether it is Christians or Muslims or any other minority population. So the law, if you're trying to say that I will bring a law must have an application which is beneficial to all the sections. It must not deprive only one section and then benefit the other section. Otherwise, if you intend to do so, then say it, and then let it pass the test of law in the court, and then the court will take it up from there. Whether it passes the test of constitutionality, whether it passes the object that it states that it intends to achieve, and whether the government is coming up with a flawed policy, or whether there is really this policy that the government proposes will benefit the society in the longer run.
Professor Geeta Bhatt, how will you like to address this concern? Law will become one more tool of oppression. I asked this question specifically because the kind of statements that we have got from certain political leaders are very different from what Centre had told the Supreme Court. For example, in December 2020, the Centre told the top court India is unequivocally against forcing family planning on its people, and that any coercion to have a certain number of children is counterproductive and leads to demographic distortions. And then we have a union minister coming out and saying that we'll have a law soon.
First of all, I think what Professor Tanveer had mentioned, I think it proved what I was trying to say, that there is always a religious perspective which gets added to when we talk about, this particular bill. So, and secondly, probably, the name of this bill, if you look, when the word control, because as a democratic country, whenever a word control comes, then there is a kind of a fear that this is something where we are trying to control things. But largely where there has been a discussion time and again in the parliament and on various other forums, it has been talking about this bill has been talking about that how, as Desh Ratan ji also mentioned, that how there could be incentives which could be attached to those, couples who are complying with the, family planning norms. So it is, rather than using the word control, if some other word could be, used in it, like for, sustainable population or any other name. So if the word probably control goes out of it, I think it will become more acceptable to a larger section of the society. And we need to look at it,
Professor Tanveer Ejaz, do you agree?
In an irreligious manner. The problem here is that a large number of people, like Professor Tanveer, they try to push it and put the arguments where it is the religious angle which comes into it. Let's come out of it. There are various political leaders, clerics who have come out and made tall claims like Mr. Badruddin Ajmal, and there are many more. Let us not get into this. If we want to really have a discussion, as per in terms of policy, 9 states are there where 49% of India's population is concentrated in 9 states. And when we are talking about that we have leveled the fertility rate, when I'm talking about pockets, I'm talking about regions. I'm not talking in terms of a community. So I'm sorry to say that I'm disappointing the professor here in the debate. I may be disappointing him, but that is what I meant. So if we can be more generous.
Okay, Professor Tanveer Ejaz now wants to respond.
Yeah, I want to say a couple of things. One, of course, is, because I think data has been now put across. NFHS data makes it very clear that now we have come down to 2.1, which now the population has stabilized right now, right? So there's no panic. The panic in the government is rather backed by the idea.
And this is something even the health minister himself had said in April this year in Parliament.
Yes. And
that's why I asked this question. Is it just political gimmick, or the objective really is to control population explosion? Because the health minister of the country only is saying that, our awareness campaigns seem to be giving good results.
Yeah, no, my only submission is my only concern right now. Can I respond to Professor Geeta Bhatt? My only concern is that one has to read the governmentality, which I mean that in the backdrop of the government is the fact that there are certain sections whose population are, even if you take Muslims or minority populations, NFHS says that it's decreasing at a very high speed, right? So if one has to be very, one wants to make population policy, one has to look into various other aspects. I always say that a population policy must focus on women's agency, the autonomy of women's agency, a comprehensive child health policy in the cultural realm. A couple having girls want another boy, so goes into for third. Now this cuts across religion. So therefore, I think we need to focus on socio-economic structures also. Per capita income of a family, if it is increasing, probably they are now going in for 2 child, right? Not more than 2 child. So there are a lot of other things I think which need to be focused, rather than always saying in such a way that, look, there are certain sections in this society who, because they have 4 wives, which again is a big rhetoric and polemic, because they have 4 wives, and therefore they can procreate more, the possibility of procreation is more, and therefore they need some punitive measures. So carrot for some, but of course punitive measures for some. Now, this is what we call indulgences. This is what we call as governmentality. One will have to read the undercurrents, and I think my other co-panelist has made it very clear time and again. This whole drum beating about the fact that population needs to be controlled, and then relating it with polygamy, polyandry, certain sections. This creates a lot of fear. It's not somebody else is creating fear. It's the government which is creating the fear in the minds of certain people. That needs to be taken cognizance of.
Mr. Desh Ratan Nigam, how will you like to address the concerns that have been raised? The fear that, some people, some communities in the country feel.
See, fear is something which is psychological and certainly not based on facts. Because when a policy of population policy comes, it is always religious neutral. It does not talk of Hindus, Muslims, or Christians. It talks about numbers. And whichever family has that number, the system of incentives and disincentives works like that. But when one says one should focus on women and child, the focus is already there. Look at the amount of schemes that are focusing on the women or the children in this government. So that work is already going on. That's a parallel work which is going on. The simultaneous work is how to improve the quality of life of the people by having a two-child norm policy or whatever the country decides. It's a national interest. And certainly this population is one area we do not want to take over China. In other fields, yes, but this is one area we should not take over China, and that it is not a matter of pride for anybody. So freedom of choice, certainly, yes, national interest is supreme.
Touseef Ahmed, even China's one-child policy failed very badly.
But we are talking about two-child policy here.
It did fail, and these policies, if you run it in a short term, I think it may find acceptability and it may find some logic. But if you allow this policy of population control for longer time, then it may backtrack. It may not help you get the desired result, and China is a very good example of that. And second point, which Professor Tanvi was saying, that is very important. If a married couple and more than a couple, the agency of a woman to procreate must not be restricted. If a family is capable, and everything has to be linked to the finances of a family. If a family is able to maintain more than 2 kids, should the government then come and regulate them? Should the government be more detailed in creating these restrictions, whether it should have any financial implications on it, whether there should be any geographical implication, whether it affects, and going by the draft policy that we have seen in Uttar Pradesh, it mainly affects the government employees. So whether this will have any impact on people doing odd jobs or in private jobs, all that has to be very cleanly defined in the law. I feel that as of now the draft is not very unambiguous. There is ambiguity. There is lots of confusion, especially if we couple the fact that the government is totally silent on these people who are either BJP MLAs, MPs, or these organization which is considered, a vote bank of BJP. These people encouraging a particular religion to procreate and to have, and also gave them number. In some places they have said you must have 4 children. Some places they have said you must have 5 children. So what does the government, and especially the Home Minister who said that the awareness campaign has worked, he must answer what he has to say to these statement by the well-meaning people of the government or well-meaning people of the community. You
well,
cannot,
absolutely. That's the reason why I, began by asking the same question, that when the awareness programs are working, do we really need a population control law? Okay, Desh Ratan Nigam, very quickly.
See, the 2 points that people are talking about, the policies are not always frozen in time. They can be of a certain duration and its effects can be seen. And if any course correction needs to be done, it can be done. Secondly, every extra child born takes away resources from another child. Please remember that. You may have your, affordability. You may afford a third child, but the resources have to come from the community. Please remember that. Educational seats, the grains that the boy consumes, the milk that they consumes, that is being taken away from a person who cannot, who can afford less. So it is not about the family alone. It is about the national interest and the resources, which has to be equitably distributed among all the sections of the society.
Can I come in, Heena? Just one point.
Okay, Professor. Yes, go ahead.
the point about women's labor participation, right? Now, we have seen research has made it very clear that women's labor participation, if it increases, the family moves towards two child, or maybe it stabilizes two child. Now, control something like a sterilization, perhaps it may be voluntary. A UP bill had sterilization as one of its tools. I mean, just imagine what kind of an impact the sterilization has on men. In fact, 2,000 men died during Sanjay Gandhi's sterilization process. So my contention always is that focus, or if you focus on
But
family,
do you think, as
on
Professor
women.
Geeta Bhatt earlier suggested, that if we remove the word control from this particular law that probably Mr. Prahlad Patel is talking about, maybe things will, be slightly different? The debate will be
No,
slightly different. Do you agree with that?
not at
Very
all.
quickly.
Not at all. We all know sustainable development. The word sustainable development is a word where the capitalists are using more resources. So if you say conservation of resources, there again you have problem. It all depends with what intention you are using this word. You can use the word sustainable, but the intention for sustainability would be coercion and
Objective
control.
intention is very, very important, and we also know that rich and better off today, Geeta Bhatt, are having lesser children and poor more. This is what some of the reports have also suggested. The resources are getting scarce due to this anomaly that population control programs have really created. I want to give you the last word.
I would like to say that whatever largely the bills can be debated and discussed and modified. But the point is that we need to have a consensus where we are, we as this country's citizens, we need to accept that the resources of this country, that they need to be used in a very, very pragmatic manner. And if we are trying to say, for example, that it is that if 4 wives are there, this is a misnomer, that they will have more children. In a way, there is a tacit approval to polygamy. So while it is being talked about that women's agencies have to be strengthened, I think this could be one of the biggest deterrents if this kind of thought process is going to be there. Secondly, let us also understand
since most of you have spoken about the issue of resources here, so the intention becomes the key. If the objective is about protecting resources and not really targeting any particular community, if that is the intention, then maybe it is a step in the right direction. But of course, we'll have to see what happens next, because with this statement, the debate has been reignited once again, and we'll see whether the government will now consider bringing something in the next session of Parliament, or will it try and make its entry into Parliament via some sort of a private member's bill like it has done in the past as well. Will it finally see the light of the day or not? That remains to be seen. But thank you very much, all of you. I'm completely out of time. Appreciate you joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening on this very, very important subject. Heading into a very short break, there's